Welcome to our daily reflection for this Sunday, July 27th. And of course, it's the Lord's Day, the day of Jesus' resurrection from the dead that we celebrate every Sunday. So it's a day of joy and a day to celebrate the victory of God. And today, the church teaches us in the readings a key theme that's fundamental to our Christian walk, and that is the importance and power of prayer. You know, a Christian who doesn't pray is like a bird that doesn't fly. I mean, we are made for prayer. Why? Because we're called to love and follow Jesus Christ. And prayer is how we have communion and fellowship and friendship with God. And that's what we're made for. And so to not pray is to fail in the most fundamental element of our Christian discipleship. And so the church reminds us today and teaches us how to pray. We start with a reading from Genesis with Abraham. And we see Abraham using a form of prayer that's very powerful, and that is intercession, praying on behalf of others. And the scriptures disclose that God hears our prayers for others, and that our praying and intercession on behalf of others, even strangers, can be very powerful. And so this is a great motive for us to use intercessory prayer, which is very important, to pray for others. And then we find the celebration of prayer in Psalm 138, in which the psalmist prays that prayer is something that God answers. And so that's a great celebration about God and His mercy and His goodness hears our prayers. And so if you need a little incentive to pray, read Psalm 138. It talks about how God answers prayers, and that will be very motivating. And in the gospel today, Jesus teaches us about prayer. It's a very, very important teaching that Jesus gives. First, the disciples come to Jesus and they ask Him, Lord, teach us how to pray. And here's the first thing, humility. We have to ask God. And so if you struggle in prayer, ask God, tell Jesus, Lord, teach me how to pray, right? And that's what the disciples do with Jesus. They have the humility. Even though they are Jews from a very pious, prayerful nation, they still know that they don't know exactly how to pray. And they go to Jesus because they see that Jesus has intimacy with God, and they want that intimacy. And so they ask Him how to pray, because prayer is the path to intimacy and friendship with God, right? And we want that. And then the first thing Jesus teaches, the most fundamental thing, is we address God not as deity, not as some divine abstract power, but as a person who is in relationship with us. And so we call upon God, thanks to Jesus' teaching, as our Abba, as Father. And that is a beautiful thing. When we realize that we're praying to God, who is almighty, but also God, who is intimately our Father, that transforms and empowers our prayer life right from the get-go. To call God Father, that is a beautiful thing. And to ask God to give us what we need and to seek His holiness, these are things that Jesus teaches. And then Jesus does a follow-up teaching that prayer should be persevering. And so He gives the example of a woman who was looking for justice and hadn't received it. And she just kept asking and asking and asking for this judge who wasn't known for being righteous, but He hears her pleas because of her perseverance. And so there's another secret fundamental ingredient. Perseverance in prayer is really important. And then there's another one. And Jesus gives another story. And first He gives a saying. And He says, look, ask and you shall receive. Seek and you shall find. Knock and it will be open unto you. Now notice the progression of those. There's a growing progression of intensity. Asking, seeking is more intense than asking. Knocking is more intense than seeking. Keep persevering. That's the lesson Jesus is teaching there. And if you ask, it will be given to you. If you seek, you will find. If you knock, the door will be open. The way will be open to you. Keep persevering. And then He tells us again, think about God as Father. So He says, what father among you, when his children ask for an egg or for food, will give them a snake or a serpent? And He says, your Father is much more better. Your Father in heaven knows how to give good gifts, even more than your earthly father. And He says, if you ask your Father in heaven, will He not give you the Holy Spirit to those who ask? Notice what Jesus tells us. God the Father will answer our prayer 100% if we ask for what is true and good, and that is grace and the gift of the Holy Spirit. He doesn't say that if we ask for good health, He'll always grant it, or if we ask for prosperity and wealth, fame and fortune. No, that's not promised to us, but God does promise what's most necessary. Because what is most necessary is that we grow as saints and grow in the love of God, that we may be saved. And God will answer that prayer 100% all the time. If we ask Him for the grace to love more, to give more, to be virtuous, and to grow closer to Him, He will always grant us that grace. Have you asked for the grace to pray with perseverance? Have you asked repeatedly for the grace to know the Father and trust in Him and grow in faith? Have you asked for the grace to grow in hope and love? Have you asked for these graces to be a friend of God and to grow in holiness, to be a saint? The more you ask and the more you persevere in asking that, the more the grace will flow into your life. Ask for these things. The humble ask, the proud does not. And so let us be humble and let us keep beseeching God as Jesus encourages us today in the gospel. May the Lord bless and keep you.
This daily reflection is brought to you thanks to the generous support of the Mission Circle. Join the Mission Circle to help Catholics worldwide understand, live, and share their faith. Sign up at missioncircle.org today.